Well, hello everybody again. Insights channel here, Steve here again. And I would like to mention that I do believe in dreams and visions and prophecies as being very significant. I know I've had some very specific dreams, prophecies, visions at different times. And it just so happens that my daughter's been visiting. For those who've heard us recently singing a happy song, that's what we like to do together. We like to sing happy songs, and we'll be recording them more for people to encourage others. But that's not the only thing we do. My daughter is also very psychic and senses things. She visits us sometimes. And it just so happened she had a very vivid dream last night. Now I myself, in my lifetime, I'm 70, 71, I can count probably on one hand, or maybe two hands, the most significant dreams I ever had that I think had real meaning to them. And I think the dream that my daughter just had last night has great significance. Very great significance, and I'll let you listen to her telling it how it happened. And in listening to it over and over again, I'm convinced that it means something. I think it means something very important, something very devastating. But to most of us, it doesn't surprise us. I think that she's talking about a devastating earthquake that happens in some city on Earth. But I'll let her tell it so you can listen to it and arrive at your own conclusions. I have mine, I have what I think it means in listening to it over and over again, but I think it would be good for everybody else to listen. See what you think. Leave us with some comments what you think from what the things are in this dream that she had. I think that when you get revelatory dreams, every detail in a dream is important to remember. And I've tried to draw it out of her. She wasn't necessarily going to write this dream down, but I told her, you need to write it down. Something that vivid, something that keeps coming back to your mind, is something worth writing down. I'd say that for others too. If you get significant dreams, visions, don't minimize it. Write it down right away. Examine it. Because all the negative spirit world will be telling you, oh, don't bother, it's nothing. The devil will certainly minimize anything revelatory that you get from God or from the spirit world. So that's why always write it down, always record it. Then maybe bounce the ball off others, see what they think too. So that's what we're doing with this dream. We want to ask people what you think. And what you think could mean. Thanks, okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. I'll let her tell the dream.
July 21st, 2023. I've just woken up for the second time with the same nightmare. It was so real, it was like I was there. I could physically feel things that were happening in the dream. I was in an apartment building. I'm not sure where, but it was definitely in the future. And all of a sudden, while my friends and I were watching a particularly lovely sunset, the earth started to shake. Very violently. Everything was shaking. It was like the worst earthquake known to man. I've never seen anything like it. It was very violent. And we saw from the horizon coming towards the apartment that we were in a very large crack in the earth forming. It was coming from where the sunset was, really fast towards us. The earth was literally opening up. And it hit the apartment, and I knew we were going down. And I screamed, everybody out, the apartment's going to get swallowed by the earth. And as everyone tried to scramble to the door during the earthquake, and as the apartment started to violently shake even more, I remember thinking, it's over. I will see my husband again. And a peace came over me, and I was ready to die. Excited, in fact. Glad that the pain of earth would be over. And then everything went black. I woke up in a very strange, scary, and unfamiliar world. It was, as far as I can tell, somewhere in the crack that we'd fallen into, like there was another world under ours. A world of terror and devastation and death. There was people wandering in the streets, half dazed. Buildings that had been completely devastated. There were people falling out of open areas, like fell out of the buildings because there was no wall. I remember seeing people with torn clothes and people in tears, forlorn faces. There was crime everywhere. People would be attacked for the smallest thing. People were so desperate. There was looting, there was theft, people scrounging for food in the trash cans. The few stores that remained standing were quickly looted and decimated. People would kill to get scraps. I couldn't believe what I was seeing around me as I crawled out of the rubble, unhurt. Amazingly, completely unhurt. And I remember seeing a little girl dangling from a building, and she was about to fall, attached to some sort of cord. She'd gotten stuck in a wire or something from TV or something, and she was about to fall, and I managed to climb up and save this little child. And maybe 2 years old, little girl with curly brown hair, and she couldn't speak English. She was traumatized. I saved her, and she started following me around everywhere. And I tried my best to help the few people that I saw that were still helpable. Eventually we got a whole group together and managed to scramble up into one of the buildings to get away from the violence. And there was no usable toilets. Everything was destroyed. It was like we'd been hit by an A-bomb or something, I don't know. But it was terrible, complete devastation. There were monsters as well. All kinds of strange creatures roaming the streets, attacking humans, like they'd been created with bits and bobs of broken machines, toys even, household equipment. There was one who had a mop for a head. Strange mechanical arms attacking people who got too close, and the mobs would lynch them, wrap the cords and ropes around them and lynch them out of windows of the remaining buildings. Half-standing buildings, and that's how they would kill these things. The only way to kill them was to lynch them, leave them hanging. And as I scrambled to help people and look for food, there was these old containers that seemed to be part of a restaurant that had some like couscous style food, seeds in it, wheat type thing, and I managed to get my fill fortunately, and I was fine. And then I got one handful left in my hand, and I was going to keep it for later, but this man who looked like a well-respected actor, he looked at me like he was desperate to get some nutrients for his child, and I handed it to him and said, "Here, you take it," and he was so grateful. I mean, imagine being so grateful for a handful of seeds. It shocked me how desperate people can get. He looked at me like I was his savior and saved his daughter's life. It was crazy. And then off he went, and I knew I'd made a friend for life because of what I did for him. it just completely shocked me that something so small could mean everything to someone who's desperate, you know? Thank God I've never found myself in such a terrible situation. Hopefully I never will, but I went off with this little toddler, protecting her from the world, and she stuck to me like glue and started acting like I was Mummy. And I saved this girl from a mob. For some reason she was desperate for the loo, and we had to get stuff together to make a makeshift toilet in one of the broken skyscrapers, and I was trying my best, but I had to use a bottle that had been previously used as a toilet, you know, for urination, and it was still half full, and as I was trying to find a place to empty it, it splashed me and I got covered in it, and that really grossed me out. And then I went to try to clean the bathroom and reattach it and make this almost like a space toilet, you know, the one that recycles the pee into water. And as I was completing that and I was trying to clean myself up, I looked out the window and, well, actually it was a half-broken wall. And in the streets I saw the most horrific things, people attacking people for no reason, criminals loose. There was a young woman's body in the street, and there was a man sexually assaulting her. That was very disturbing. She was dead. He was assaulting a corpse, and children running around in rags, people screaming, everybody panicking. And these monsters that were walking around was like they were zombified, like they were half aware and half not. It was very strange. And I remember getting a group of refugees together. That's the best word I can come up. Survivors, non-violent types together and trying to find a way to create a shelter. And I had an idea, because these buildings, they were completely exposed. I mean, we found an old yard full of buses that had been abandoned, like a bus station, and I had this idea to strap the buses together. We had this metal saw, electric saw, that you could cut through metal, and we started to line the buses up because they were still drivable, still had petrol. So obviously this is a recent event, this whole disaster, within a few months of I felt like it had happened a few months before I'd arrived to the world beneath mine, if that makes sense. And we managed to line up like 50 buses and cut the walls out to make like a makeshift sort of community shelter. And as I was trying to collect rubble to, help with building, I saw a large group of bicycles. It was like a bunch of bikes, all in blue, all these guys in blue cycling, like 50 cyclers, with perfectly normal equipment, no damage whatsoever, cycling straight through the disaster zone. And I stopped one of them and I was like, "What are you doing? There's been a terrible disaster here, can't you see?" And it was like, this man was completely oblivious to it, and he acted arrogant, like, almost like, "How dare you disturb my cycling trip?" Like he was completely oblivious, and this whole group just carried on up the road, through the debris, like they couldn't even see what was happening around them. It was weird. And then I woke up. I'd love to know what this means, because I'm sure it's got some very significant meaning. I mean, I get occasionally very realistic, freaky dreams, and I always know when it's some sort of warning or futuristic, but I don't always know exactly what it means, so I leave it to you to decide for yourselves.
Well, hello everybody again. Steve here with the Insights site, and now I have the privilege, I'm going to interview my daughter Camilla, By the way, she's not some little girl or something. She's a mature woman whose husband died about 3-4 years ago. She's a very brave woman, which she even mentions in her dream. But without further ado, since her dream that she had just last night, it was so significant, I'm going to ask her some questions for her to clarify for us. So, you had this amazing dream where you are on the 7th floor of a skyscraper somewhere.
Yes.
I'm getting that right?
Yes, and I'm not sure where, but I think it was...
You have no idea where it could be on the planet?
I got an impression I was somewhere in Europe or somewhere modern, definitely. It was...
Could have been the United States?
It could have been. There was no markers to tell me exactly where I was.
Well, first of all, you're in this tall skyscraper. We won't go through all the details now because I've already related that. But there was this devastating earthquake. Now, my question to you is, it seems like you said this was one of the worst earthquakes you've ever heard of or experienced, like off the Richter scale. Is this correct? Like,
oh, yes. Oh,
end of the world, like Revelation 16 style?
Yes.
My question to you is it possible this was not just happening where you were, but it was happening simultaneously all over the world?
Yes.
Could that be?
At least, absolutely. I got the impression that it was somewhat of a global event. And
what gave you that impression?
I had a very strong feeling that it was a global disaster.
Okay, well that's important to know because it talks about exactly an earthquake like that in Revelation 16, when all the towers were shaken down, all the buildings in the world simultaneously.
Yeah.
All came down, right? Well, another thing I noticed, very, very interesting, what you stated was, you stated you were in the 7th floor, and as the building fell down to the ground, at first you thought you were obviously going to die. If the building was about to collapse, you saw the ground opening up, and terrible earthquake go right towards the building. You knew it was the end, as by your statement in there. But what you also said that's very interesting is you said it was like you, when you woke up out of it, you were in a slightly lower dimension. In other words, some sort of dimensional shift occurred. And I want to point out to you is at the end of your story, you talk about these 50 cyclists on blue bicycles, right? Now, could it be that those blue cyclists, the reason why they have blue bicycles, in the United States, there are 2 types of states. There's the blue states and there's the red states. The blue states are the liberal states like California, where anything goes, and that's what I was thinking. I'm also thinking that your last scene there with the blue cyclists is also dimensional shift back in time because they didn't notice what was going on all around. They were those from back in time. They were warned of what was going to happen. Their attitude towards you and getting angry at you was because they didn't want to listen. They didn't want to know. You were seeing a shift back in time there. So in your dream, you have 2 shifts of time. Dimensional shift down and a time shift backwards.
Wow. Which
is quite remarkable. You couldn't know that in having a dream, but it's in getting the interpretation for it, that's what I was getting. And so what do you think of that?
That makes a lot of sense. Because it definitely felt like I had been, like falling through the crack had sent me forward.
Yes.
Almost like I had fallen through a crack in the earth. There was the beginning of a disaster. It was like I was 3 months into it, into the future.
You seemingly fell from just nothing but rubble and you emerge from it unsaved. To me, it's like you're a spirit observer. You're not actually part of the thing. Although your spirit is one of helping others, you immediately, what do? You go and help the child, or you go and help the actor, or help his daughter. Now here's a key thing to me. In significant dreams, every detail is important. I've learned that from experience. The fact that you said that you met a professional actor, or a famous actor and his daughter, that to me is telling me the location. This is telling me it's something like Hollywood in California.
Well, the actor was Steve Martin, and he is American.
Okay, there you go. I would say California is a very prime target for earthquakes. They've been warning California for decades, even for the last 100 years, that in very grave danger there in places like San Francisco. Very, very serious place to be, and Hollywood's right there too, right? And I know a lot of people have been praying against Hollywood as being more like Hollywood than Hollywood, so it would not surprise me at all that what many scientists and many people have warned California for many years, get out of that place, get out of that danger zone. And many movies made about it too, you know. So I wonder if the fact that in your dream that you mention you met a famous actor is to give guidance as to where it is. Could
Possibly.
that be?
Yes, that is definitely possible. He did seem to be in a home environment and he was concerned about his family.
Yes. Well, I think I pretty much covered all my questions, I think. It was just a few questions, because it's very, mostly self-explanatory. That your dream is, I just want to confirm that it was total devastation. It was big enough to describe as it could be on a world scale.
Total devastation, which is also why I suggested that we modernize the buses into a shelter, because everything was flat. There was rubble in the streets. It was impossible to negotiate through the streets without climbing over rubble. Which also fascinates me, your idea about the cyclists having been in a different time shift, because they were going straight. It was as almost though they couldn't see the rubble and they could cycle right through it.
Well, that's exactly what the blue states are, those who are liberalists. Do you know the word liberal is mentioned in the Bible? It describes it exactly like the left are, and the liberals. It describes it perfectly, believe it or not. I have another question for you, something very interesting. You mentioned there were some strange, like, creatures or monsters which attacked people, but they were like the strange thing. One had a mop head, and so made of parts of toys. Do you have anything more you say on that?
They were mechanical monsters that had been created out of bits and bobs of things that it felt like some mad scientist or someone had created a bunch of creatures as an experiment out of...
Could they be AI?
Possibly. But they had been created out of things that were to hand after the catastrophe. Whoever this person was that created them, they were not done professionally, because one had a robotic arm and a mop head and then a hook on that side. They were like really strange things, but if a human came anywhere near them, they'd tear them to shreds. But they walked around like they were zombies. Like they didn't recognize anything until you got within a certain parameter of their existence, and then they'd get violent.
They sound electronic. They sound like some sort of AI creation.
Yeah,
something
I
gone
got that
wrong.
impression. Yeah, like they had some sort of AI intelligence, but it was not quite right.
Okay, well, that's basically the question I wanted to ask you in your dream, because I think most of it is self-explanatory for people to listen to. But I want to say I think that dream is very significant indeed. I've heard of very few dreams with that amount of descriptions which are prophetic and with details and colours in it that you couldn't even know. You didn't know what they meant. So it's very, very interesting. Anyway, what I would say is that this dream is worth taking seriously. Yourself away from earthquake zones. The earth is thin and where it's known to have serious earthquakes or volcanic activity, because the world is getting destabilized for whatever reasons, whatever they're doing to this planet with their chemtrails and with their experiments and their bombs and endless madness. We just know that the crust of the earth is becoming destabilized. We know eventually it will be so serious that, according to Revelation 16, it will bring down the towers. The day the towers fall, all the cities will be shaken down to the ground. That it will come in the wrath of God eventually. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean to say that we couldn't have very serious earthquakes in places like California. And so I think it's a warning. I think it's a warning dream. In summing up, I'd say it's a warning dream from God, given to my daughter, will warn people about serious things that could soon happen. Big question is, when?
Yes.
Well, thanks for listening. Bye for now. Okay, hello again. Well, here's a few more summaries from that dream. One thing that Camilla mentioned was that the cyclists on the blue bicycles were arrogant and didn't appreciate her stopping them asked them questions. And they were oblivious to what was going on around them. And that's why I said it's like, almost like they came from a different time zone or from the past. But she also said as she woke up, she felt like they had something to do with the UN. It's interesting because the UN is represented by blue. And also Nostradamus talked about the Antichrist as wearing a blue turban, blue color Antichrist system. And yes, those that think they rule like the UN and the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum, they do all act very arrogant. Like there's them and the peons, the cockroaches. That is their whole attitude, and they do have an agenda for 2030 to have gotten rid of 90% of the world's population by hook or by crook, whether they use earthquakes by design. And I was wondering if maybe that when she mentioned she saw these monsters that seemed like electronic or AI, it seems almost as though the disaster could have been deliberately caused. Is such a thing possible in modern times? Well, all you have to know is about genetic, what's it called? Geoengineering. Hell yes, they can shift the climate by altering the jet wave, the jet stream, the wave of it and what position it's in. And I think there's a lot of things they're messing around with that is damaging our planet. I think that's the problem, so that weak areas in the world like California, and we already got a fault line, it's even more dangerous now. It's just a matter of time as to when some of these major earthquakes happen. We know that eventually it's going to happen in California. We don't know when. But it seems unfortunately there are demonic agenda and beings from below who are determined to destroy as much of mankind as they can. They know their time is short, so does Satan, but their determination is to take as many humans down with them as they go. That's their crazy plan. So we better keep our eyes open. But I'd warn people, don't live in earthquake zones or volcanic areas. Get away from those areas, because you never know what's going to trigger a major volcanic eruption or major earthquake these days. There's so many factors involved. Thanks for listening.